నిర్వహించి మరి వేరియస్ సబ్జెక్ట్స్ మీద మరి కావాల్సినటువంటి సమాచారాన్ని, జ్ఞానాన్ని అందించడం జరిగింది. చాలా సక్సెస్ఫుల్ గా. మరి ఈ ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్లో కానీ, తెలంగాణలో కానీ ఎలాంటి కమర్షియల్ దీన్ని టచ్ చేయకోకుండా మరి ఈ విధంగా సేవ చేస్తున్నటువంటి సంస్థ ఓన్లీ వన్ అండ్ ఓన్లీ ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్ సైకాలజిస్ట్ ఫెడరేషన్. దీనికి వెన్నుదన్నుగా నిలుస్తున్న మా ఉమామహేశ్వరరావు గారికి, మరి టెక్నికల్ సపోర్ట్ ఇస్తున్నటువంటి సీతాపతి గారికి, అలాగే మరి మా అందరికి ఆల్రౌండర్ సుబ్బారావు గారికి, మా అందరికి కూడా ధన్యవాదాలు తెలియజేసుకుంటున్నాను. ఈరోజు ఈ సెషన్ని మనకు అందించడానికి ఇచ్చేసినటువంటి డాక్టర్ గారు కోటా సురేష్ గారికి కూడా ప్రత్యేకంగా ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్ సైకాలజిస్ట్ ఫెడరేషన్ తరఫున థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ సార్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ సార్. మీ యొక్క అమూల్యమైనటువంటి జ్ఞానాన్ని మాకు ముందు రోజుల్లో మరింతగా అందించాలని మిమ్మల్ని కోరుకుంటూ ఈ సెషన్ని మరి స్టార్ట్ చేయవలసిందిగా మా సుబ్బారావు గారు మిమ్మల్ని ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేస్తారు. చేసిన తర్వాత సెషన్ స్టార్ట్ చేయవలసింది కోరుతున్నాను సార్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ సార్.
థ్యాంక్ యూ టైటస్ గారు. ఈరోజు ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్ సైకాలజిస్టుల ఫెడరేషన్ రాష్ట్ర అధ్యక్షులు ఉమామహేశ్వరరావు గారి అధ్యక్షతన జరుగుతున్నటువంటి ఈగో డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం క్లాస్కి విచ్చేసినటువంటి అందరికీ స్వాగతం, సుస్వాగతం. నాకు మా డాక్టర్ కోటా సురేష్ గారిని పరిచయం చేయమని నాకు ఒక అసైన్మెంట్ ఇచ్చారు ఏపీఎఫ్ రాష్ట్ర కమిటీ. డాక్టర్ కోటా సురేష్ గారు మా గుంటూరులో ఒక 35 సంవత్సరాలుగా సైక్రాటిస్ట్గా ఒక 20 పడకల హాస్పిటళ్ళు నడుపుతూ అనేక వేల మందిని మానసిక రోగుల్ని చాలా ఆప్యాయతగా, మా సురేష్ గారికి ఉన్న పేరేంటంటే మా గుంటూరులో ఆప్యాయత కలిగినటువంటి సైక్రాటిస్ట్. సమాజాన్ని ఒక మంచిని కోరుకునేటువంటి సైక్రాటిస్టు. ఆయన పుట్టింది రాయలసీమ, అనంతపురం జిల్లా కదిరిలో పుట్టినటువంటి సురేష్ గారు కాకినాడ రంగరాయ మెడికల్ కాలేజీలో మెడిసిన్ ఎంబీబీఎస్ చేశారు. తర్వాత నిమ్హాన్స్లో డిపిఎం చేశారు. చండీగఢ్లో సైక్రాటరీ ఎండి చేశారు. చండీగఢ్లో సైక్రాటరీ ఎండి చేసిన ఆ చండీగఢ్ దీనిలో ఫస్ట్ ర్యాంకర్గా వచ్చారు. చదువుకునేటప్పుడే చాలా తెలియగలిగినటువంటి స్టూడెంట్ అనేటువంటిది కోటా సురేష్ గారికి ఉన్నటువంటి పేరు. ఆ తర్వాత ఆయనకి మనకి అటాచ్మెంట్ ఏంటంటే ఆయన మనలాగా కూడా సైకాలజీ నాగార్జున యూనివర్సిటీ నుంచి సైకాలజీ పీజీ చేశారు. వీళ్ళు ఒక గ్రూపుగా, ఒక మిత్రులుగా, వీళ్ళు 4 డాక్టర్లు, మన అరవింద్ మాస్టారు, వీళ్ళంతా కలిసి ఒక గ్రూపుగా సైకాలజీ చేశారు. డిస్కషన్గా మాకు ఇక్కడ గుంటూరులో ఆ సైకాలజీ సబ్జెక్ట్స్ మీద కొన్ని డిస్కషన్స్ జరపడంలో బాగా వీళ్ళంతా కలిసి ఒక టీమ్గా కూడా ఉంటా ఉన్నారు. అట్లా ఒక సైకాలజీ కూడా పీజీ చేసినటువంటి మనం ఆ సైకాలజిస్ట్ అని 2 కూడా అనాలేమో అని నేను అనుకుంటా ఉన్నా. అట్లాగే ఐఎంఏ మా గుంటూరు ప్రెసిడెంట్ చేశారు, సెక్రటరీ చేశారు. అట్లాగే సైక్రాటిస్ట్ అసోసియేషన్ రాష్ట్ర అధ్యక్షులు చేశారు, సెక్రటరీ చేశారు. అట్లాగే రాష్ట్రంలో అనేక పీజీ విద్యార్థులకి, సైక్రాటరీ చదువుతున్నటువంటి పీజీ విద్యార్థులకు ఒక గురువుగా ఉంటున్నారు. ఇప్పటికి కూడా చాలా మంది పిల్లలకి ఒక గైడ్గా ఉంటున్నారు. సైక్రాటరీ చేస్తున్నటువంటి పిల్లలకి ఏ రకమైన డౌట్ వచ్చినా తీర్చగలిగినటువంటి మాస్టారు. సైక్రాటిస్టు కాటూరి మెడికల్ కాలేజీలో ప్రొఫెసర్గా పనిచేస్తున్నారు. సైక్రాటరీ హెచ్ఓడిగా ఉన్నారు, ఆ డిపార్ట్మెంట్కి హెచ్ఓడిగా ఉన్నారు. నిత్యం విద్యార్థులతో ఉంటూ అనేక రకాలైనటువంటి సెమినార్స్, అనేక టాపిక్ల మీద బర్నింగ్. ఈ సార్ దగ్గర ఉన్నటువంటి ఒక స్పెషాలిటీ ఏంటంటే బర్నింగ్ టాపిక్ ఏదైతే, మానసికంగా ఫేస్ చేసే బర్నింగ్ టాపిక్ ఏదైతే, ఆ సమస్య మీద ఖచ్చితంగా ఆయన కాలేజీనే బేస్ చేసుకొని, అట్లాగే స్టేట్ లో ఉన్నటువంటి సైక్రాటరీ స్టూడెంట్స్ ని బేస్ చేసుకొని ఆయన వర్క్ షాప్స్ జరుపుతూ ఉంటారు. నేను కూడా attend అయ్యాను. అట్లాగే రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వం అనౌన్స్ చేసిన మొన్న కరోనా టైంలో రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వం అనౌన్స్ చేసినటువంటి సైక్రాటిస్టులు వీళ్ళకి ఫోన్ చేయండి అని చెప్పి అనౌన్స్ చేసినటువంటి టీముకి ప్రధానమైనటువంటి బాధ్యతల్లో కూడా ఉన్నారు. అనేక రకాలైనటువంటి సర్వీస్ యాక్టివిటీస్ కూడా పేద ప్రజలకి అట్లా సామాన్యులకి ఏదైనా సమస్య వచ్చినా కూడా మా గుంటూరు ప్రాంతంలో నిలబడేటువంటి మానవత్వం ఉన్నటువంటి మనిషి డాక్టర్ కోటా సురేష్ గారు ఇవాళ మనకి ఈగో డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం అనేటువంటి క్లాస్ ని చెప్పబోతా ఉన్నారు. ఈ టైటిల్ పెట్టిన తర్వాత ఈ 2 రోజుల్లో నన్ను 2-3 సైకాలజిస్టులు ఫోన్ చేశారు. డాక్టర్ గారికి నా విజ్ఞప్తి ఏంటంటే అసలు ఈగో వేరు డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం వేరు అనే భావనలో కూడా కొంతమంది ఉన్నారు. ఈగో వేరు డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం వేరు. ఈగో డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం వేరువేరుగా చెప్తారా లేకపోతే కలిపి చెప్తారా, ఎట్లా చెప్తారు అని కూడా కొంతమంది నన్ను వేశారు. ఆ క్వశ్చన్ నేను మీ క్లాస్ అయిపోయిన తర్వాత వేద్దాం అనుకున్నాను, కానీ వచ్చినటువంటి అది మీకు ముందే ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ చెప్తా ఉన్నాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ డాక్టర్ కోటా సురేష్ గారు. మేము ఆహ్వానించగానే మా ఈ క్లాస్ ఇచ్చేసి మా గ్రూపు మేము ఒక 75 మెంబర్స్ సీరియస్ పర్సన్స్ ఉన్నారు ఈ రాష్ట్రంలో. మా అందరికీ ఈ జ్ఞానాన్ని ఇవ్వడానికి వచ్చినటువంటి పెద్దలు గురువులు కోటా సురేష్ గారిని వినయంగా ఆహ్వానిస్తూ నాకు పరిచయం చేయడానికి నాకు ఈ అవకాశం ఇచ్చినటువంటి మా ఏపీఎఫ్ రాష్ట్ర టీం కి ధన్యవాదాలు తెలియజేసుకుంటూ ముగిస్తా ఉన్నాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ. రాష్ట్ర అధ్యక్షులు గారు మీరే.
ఇప్పుడు డాక్టర్ గారు క్లాస్ అయిన తర్వాత మాట్లాడదాం సార్. ఆయన అలా
మీరు ప్రారంభించండి. మీరు జెండా ఊపితే స్టార్ట్
సో గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ ఎవ్రీవన్. ఈ రోజు చాలా సంతోషం, డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారు వచ్చి మనకి చాలా విషయాలు తెలియజేస్తారు. ముఖ్యంగా కొత్తగా అడుగు పెడుతున్న సైకాలజిస్టులు మాత్రం జాగ్రత్తగా ఈ సబ్జెక్ట్ వినండి. ఎందుకంటే ఇవన్నీ ప్రాక్టికల్ గా బాగా సీనియర్స్ ఎక్కడో సెమినార్స్ లో వాటిలో డిస్కస్ చేసే సబ్జెక్టులు ఇవి. మనకి మామూలుగా దొరకని సబ్జెక్టులు. సో చాలా కేర్ఫుల్ గా నోట్ చేసుకోండి. కావలిస్తే ఏవైనా రియల్ జెన్యూన్ డౌట్ ఉంటే ఆఖరిలో సార్ని అడుగుదాం. ఎందుకంటే ఆయన వాళ్ళు చెప్పే రీతిలో మనకి సాధారణంగా డౌట్లు ఉండవు, అన్ని విపులీకరించి చెప్తారు కాబట్టి. సో ఇంతటితో మే నౌ రిక్వెస్ట్ డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారు టు ప్లీజ్ go ahead with his session, sir. Please, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you for the executive of Andhra Pradesh Psychological Federation for inviting me. And Dr. Pratyusha Subbarao garu introduction చేసిన తర్వాత నా గురించి కాదేమో ఎవరి గురించో పొరపాటున ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేశారేమో అనిపించింది ఆయన చెప్పినవన్నీ వింటుంటే. నాకున్నాయా ఇది అని ఏమో మరి. ఎనీవే ఐ విల్ ట్రై టు లివ్ అప్ టు యువర్ ఎక్స్పెక్టేషన్స్. అండ్ 3 days బ్యాక్ సార్ ఫోన్ చేశారు, ఏదైనా ఒక క్లాస్ తీసుకోవాలి సార్ సండే అంటే. ఇప్పుడు సండే మార్నింగ్ 11:30కి నాకు మా సౌత్ జోన్ పోస్ట్ గ్రాడ్యుయేట్స్కి ఒక క్లాస్ తీసుకోవాల్సి ఉండేది. అందుకని కొద్దిగా డౌట్ పడ్డా ఎలా చేయగలం అని. కానీ టైమింగ్స్ డిఫరెంట్ అన్నారు. సరే ధైర్యంగా మళ్ళీ సుబ్బారావు గారు మళ్ళీ అవకాశం ఇవ్వరేమో అని పక్కన తీసేసుకున్నా, లేకపోతే కష్టం.
థ్యాంక్ యూ
సార్. తర్వాత మేము ఇందాక సుబ్బారావు గారు చెప్పినట్టు నేను కూడా సైకాలజిస్ట్నే. ఇప్పుడు 3 years బ్యాక్ నేను, మోహన్ భాస్కర్ గారు, తర్వాత అరవింద్ గారు మేమంతా కంప్లీట్ చేసాం 3 years బ్యాక్ నాగార్జున యూనివర్సిటీ, డిస్టెన్స్ యూనివర్సిటీ. అప్పుడు సుబ్బారావు గారు వాళ్ళతో పరిచయం అవటం ఇది జరిగింది అదృష్టవశాత్తు. అప్పుడు ఎగ్జామ్స్ టైం మాత్రం నిజంగా ఇప్పటికీ మర్చిపోలేను. మా 1 week ఎగ్జామ్స్, ఫస్ట్ ఇయర్ ఎగ్జామ్స్ అప్పుడేమో మా అబ్బాయి పెళ్లి కనుక రాయలేకపోయాను. సో ఫస్ట్ ఇయర్ సెకండ్ ఇయర్ కలిపి ఎగ్జామ్స్ రాశాను. అది మార్నింగ్ ఏమో కాటూరి కాలేజీలో ప్రొఫెసర్గా స్టూడెంట్స్కి క్లాస్ తీసుకోవటం, వాళ్ళ తప్పులు పట్టుకోవటం, మధ్యాహ్నం వెళ్ళి నేను స్టూడెంట్గా పేపర్లు రాయటం, సాయంకాలం వచ్చేటప్పటికి హాస్పిటల్కి వెళ్ళి పేషెంట్స్ని చూడటం, ట్రిపుల్ రోల్. ఆ వీక్ అంతా కేబుల్స్ వచ్చింది. ఎనివే సార్ అనగానే ఎగో డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజమ్స్ అయితే బాగుంటుందేమో అని అనిపించింది. ఎందుకంటే మేము కూడా డిస్కషన్లో జనరల్గా ఏంటంటే సైకియాట్రిస్టులు అందరం కూడా మోర్ ఆన్ బయోలాజికల్ సైకియాట్రీ, ఫార్మాథెరపీ, మందులు వీటి మీద వెళ్తాం, కానీ మోర్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ సైకలాజికల్ ఆస్పెక్ట్స్ స్ట్రెస్ చేయము. సో యంగ్ పీపుల్కి ఉపయోగపడుతుంది. మాకు ఫస్ట్ ఇయర్లో సైకాలజీ ఒక పేపరు, 2-3 క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉంటాయి ఎండి సైకియాట్రీలో. సో ఆ యాంగిల్లో ఇది డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం స్టార్ట్ చేద్దాం. పైగా ఇవాళ చాలా మంచిదైన ఒక జస్ట్ 24 hours బ్యాక్ మనం గురు పూర్ణిమ జరుపుకున్నాం, గురువులందరికీ సిగ్నిఫికెన్స్ ఇస్తూ. సో ఈ గురువులందరికీ నాకు నన్ను ఈ స్థితికి తీసుకొచ్చిన మా గురువులందరికీ నమస్కారం. అండ్ నాకు ఇప్పటికీ గురువు ఎవరు అంటే మా పేషెంట్స్. ప్రతి పేషెంట్ దగ్గర మనం చాలా నేర్చుకుంటాం. ఒక్కొక్క పేషెంట్ ఒక్కొక్క ఇది ఎంత డయాగ్నోస్ ఉన్నా, డిజీజ్ ఉన్నా, పర్సనల్గా ఒక్కొక్కరికి ఒక ఎమోషన్ ఉంటుంది, కాన్సెప్ట్ ఉంటుంది. వాళ్ళ దగ్గర మనం ఎన్నో నేర్చుకుంటాం. ఎప్పటికీ మనం నిత్య విద్యార్థులం. వీ కెన్ నెవర్ మాస్టర్ ఎనీథింగ్. వీ హ్యావ్ టు బి ఆల్వేస్ ఎ స్టూడెంట్. So this term defense mechanism has been raised in relation to psychology, was first used by Sigmund Freud, who is the father of psychiatry, in 1894 for the first time. He meant it to describe, as his daughter Anna Freud says, the ego struggle against painful or unendurable ideas or effects which may result in neurosis. So a defense is developed by the ego in order to protect itself against being overcome by unconscious demands like sex and aggression. Whenever we talk about Freud, we know that he has given a lot of importance to sexuality. That was, we have to always consider when a person talks about something, the era from which he hails from. Freud during 1894, it was Victorian era, where sex was a taboo.
Sorry for the disturbance. This screen రావట్లేదు సార్, అంటే
రావట్లేదండి,
స్క్రీన్ షేర్ అవ్వలేదు. ఒకసారి స్టాప్ చేసి
అలాగే అండి, అలాగే. ఇప్పుడు వస్తాను సార్.
వచ్చింది సార్, థ్యాంక్ యూ.
ఓకే,
డాక్టర్ గారు వచ్చింది.
ఫుల్ స్క్రీన్ చేస్తానండి. ఓకే కదండి? Okay, fine. So the term defense in relation to psychology was first used by Freud, and he has given more importance to aggression and sexuality. This was because he hails from Victorian era, and during Victorian era, sex was a taboo. So a lot of people who had conflicts was related to sex and aggression. And so at that time, he has given a lot of importance to sex, which was a conflict. And he used this defense of mechanisms of the ego to protect the ego from id as well as superego. As you know, this is the famous slide which describes the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and unconscious mind as a tip of the iceberg. The conscious mind is only just of the tip of the iceberg, where the small amount of mental activity is known. Well, you can see the down one is subconscious, things we could be aware, but we wanted or tried. So they don't come all of a sudden like that to the mind, but you have to try. The subconscious has to be brought back. It can be brought back. But once it goes into unconscious, it is very difficult, and probably psychologists, psychoanalysts, they have to dig it and bring it back. What we do is at the conscious level, we suppress some things into the subconsciousness, but this can be brought back into consciousness or completely make it go into unconscious. So these are the three things which he has brought out: subconscious, conscious, and unconsciousness. Then at the same time, he has come out with id, ego, and superego concept. Id is a part of the unconscious mind and comprises the two instincts, that is eros and thanatos, that is life and death instincts. So then there are a lot of things which have been stored in the unconsciousness, that is memory, sexual and aggressive fears, unacceptable sexual desires, violent motives, irrational wishes, immoral urges, selfish needs, shameful experiences, traumatic experiences. All these things are driven into the unconsciousness so that it will not trouble the person. That was the Freudian concept. The work of the psychoanalyst or psychotherapist is to get a person back the instinctual drive into consciousness, which may involve isolating the original pain experienced when they were confronted by an impulse that was not satisfied. That is, initially when the conflict was there, it has been suppressed down, but now it is brought back again by the psychotherapist and psychoanalyst, and then they try to see the point and solve the problem so that the pain will not be there much. So that is the major role of psychoanalyst. In fact, these days psychotherapists are comparatively few, and especially people who practice psychoanalysis are even few. In fact, for practice, because the reason is for psychoanalysis, you have to do so many sessions of therapy to bring out all these instinctual drives, hidden one from unconscious to subconscious and then to conscious. And it takes so many sessions. So these days of rapid improvement where people want, you can't get an instant gain with these things, and people are not ready for a lot of psychoanalytical type of therapy. And second thing is, even psychotherapist who practices psychoanalysis, he has to undergo psychoanalysis by his guru. Unless he undergoes psychoanalysis, his ego conflicts doesn't come into the way of therapy. So he has to undergo psychoanalysis, then only he can do. For example, Freud has done psychoanalysis to Anna Freud and Anna, his daughter, and Anna Freud then started doing the psychoanalysis. In fact, whenever we talk about defense mechanisms, it is Freud and Anna Freud that have mainly contributed to these things. And you have to, as I mentioned, you have to take the era of the people who has come out with the principles at that time. As I was telling, it was Victorian era where sexual was taboo, no discussion openly. So at that time, a lot of sexual conflicts were present. And even Anna Freud, who has come out with her concept of ego defense mechanisms, she was the person who was much attached to Freud. She was not attached to the mother. And she was not attached to her siblings. Her 5 children, she was not at all attached. She was more attached to the Freud, and she had done some good studies. And she is very popular mainly for child psychoanalysis. In fact, Freud believed that we cannot do psychoanalysis to the child because by that time the child will not have a lot of things, ego or superego is not fully formed and it is difficult to do it. But she has studied mainly children of deprived homes, people who have been in the parents who have participated in the wars, orphan children, and she has come out with some defense mechanisms used by the children. She was the main person who came out with child psychotherapy and play therapy. She was the first person who started observing the children at the home sitting. It's not that the child comes to the therapist. She used to go to the child's home and see how the child was behaving. So both of them have contributed very significantly to the defense mechanisms. What happens? The ego continuously tries to achieve harmony between itself and the outside world, but this harmony does not always lead to perfect mental health. Sometimes when the ego wins, a person as a whole may have lost. So it is not that every time ego defense mechanisms are helpful. There are what we call as pathological defense mechanisms, neurotic defense mechanisms, and immature defense mechanisms. So it's not always the defense mechanism is going to help. How you use it, how often you use it, how frequently you use it, all this depends, and that will lead to normalcy or a neurotic problem. So that way, ego is important. As you all know, the ego is a formation between the conflict of id and superego. Id is a natural instinct. It wants it. Whatever the consequences may be, it wants the desire, it wants to get the desire fulfilled by whatever means. Doesn't want to obey the laws and regulations of the society. While superego is the police of the thing. The superego will try to control. No, don't do it. It is against the society. It is against social norms. You will be punished. So that is what superego and id. So now, when such a conflict is there, ego has to satisfy both id and superego and come to a compromise. And that is by a defense mechanism. And as I said, all defense mechanisms are not mature defense mechanisms. We'll be discussing what type of defense mechanisms are mature, what type of mechanisms are immature, and the defense mechanisms have to be used. And superego also need not always be present. Like you have been brought up in an environment by your parents who have taught you a lot of things, and you have to do some rules and regulations of the society. And now the child has gone to the college where he is completely free. He can do anything what he wants because now parents are not there. But yet the rules, laws that have been imbibed in his mind from the parents, that acts as a superego. Even when parents are not there, their rules and regulations are imbibed by you. So the person, it could be parents, it could be your teacher, it could be some other role model. These rules and regulations are imbibed in your mind as a superego and say, you should not do this, and caution the ego not to yield to the id. So this is the fight always between id and superego. And the resultant thing is the ego. When people experience difficulties, they have different ways of handling the pain. These different ways of dealing with pain are called defense mechanisms. Originally conceived by Sigmund Freud, much of the development of these mechanisms was done by his daughter, Anna Freud. And defense mechanisms can be healthy or unhealthy depending upon the circumstances and how much a person uses them. In fact, if you take the defense mechanisms, the major difference between Anna Freud and Freud, Anna Freud is the first neo-Freudian, you can say. And she has given more importance to social and cultural aspects of the society. While Freud was saying always it is sexuality, instincts, eros, and thanatos, the Anna Freud has stressed more on social and cultural aspects. And this was what neo-Freudians like Adler, Eric Horney, all agreed on that particular aspect of socialization and cultural aspects of the thing. These are the clusters of defense mechanisms. As I was mentioning, mature, immature, pathological defense. There is another concept of narcissistic defense mechanisms, immature defense mechanisms, neurotic defense mechanisms, or psychotic defense mechanisms, and mature defense mechanisms. Under narcissistic, you can see on the left side, projection, denial, and splitting. These are the three narcissistic defense mechanisms, while the immature defense mechanisms are blocking, regression, somatization, and introjection. While the neurotic defense mechanisms, which we come across in the OCD, anxiety, phobia, are mainly displacement, repression, isolation of the affect, intellectualization, acting out, rationalization, reaction formation, undoing, and dissociation. Especially the reaction formation, undoing are more characteristic of obsessive compulsive disorder. The defense mechanisms used. The mature defense mechanisms, these are very mature, are humor, sublimation, and suppression. So these are the mechanisms which have to be practiced, because if you have a problem, it is better you use mature defense mechanisms. If you use immature or neurotic defense mechanisms, though you overcome the conflict at that moment, by repeated using of such mechanism, you are going to land into a neurotic or anxietic problem, and rare cases as a psychotic problem. The narcissistic cluster, as you can see, projection, which we see every day, day in and day out. These are all the games which we play. In some defense mechanisms are the games which the persons can play, perceiving and reacting to unacceptable inner impulses and their desires as though they were outside the self. They have their own inner impulses which are not acceptable, inner desires which are not acceptable, and they perceive it from outside. For example, a man is unable to accept that he has competitive or hostile feelings of an acquaintance, and he says that person doesn't like me. The fact is, I am not liking that person, but using a narcissistic projection defense, I say, Miss, that person is not liking me. That is one way of projection things. Second, a woman denying to herself that she has sexual feelings about a co-worker accuses him without a bias of flirt and describes him as a wolf. So that person is quite okay, but this lady has a lot of sexual desires, impulses, but she accuses the other person of having flirting activities and describes him as a wolf. That is the projection defense mechanism, which a lot of people frequently use. It's a part of narcissistic cluster. And then denial. Denial is an unconscious mechanism completely. Watching but refusing to acknowledge what one sees or hears and what is actually heard. Denial avoids becoming aware of some painful aspect of the reality. Why is the person denying the things? Because if that reality is accepted by him, it causes a lot of pain and he cannot tolerate that pain. And to avoid that pain, the ego is using the denial defense mechanism. It unconsciously uses this mechanism. For example, a person having an extramarital affair gives no thought to the possibility of a pregnancy. A woman might be having the extramarital affair, but she gives no thought that she might become pregnant by having this extramarital affair. She denies that subconsciously. And persons living near a volcano discard the dangers involved. So this is denial, a subconscious mechanism, which is again a narcissistic defense mechanism. Then splitting. Splitting is you perceive all persons either good or bad. There is no something in between. A person is either good, a person is either bad. Completely black and white, nothing in between. See, when we see a personality, he might be good in some aspects, bad in some aspects, neutral in some aspects, but these people, they feel either he is completely good, 100% good, or 100% bad. That is what splitting is. For example, an individual views other people as either innately good or innately evil than as an individual who is defined by his or her actions. He is just so perfect and wonderful, says a teenage girl in love. We come across, especially you psychologists come across more than us, about young ladies falling in love with people either very much inferior to the economical status or educational status. This lady who has fallen in love with an auto driver with a minimal education, but this lady is an engineer and earning a lot of money. She falls in love with this person. Which way? Everybody is surprised. The relatives, friends, doctor. Why are you preferring that boy? He doesn't have educational qualification. He is low to your socio-economical status. But she sees only good in that boy. No bad things at all. That is completely white. That is what splitting is. Coming to immature defense mechanisms. These are immature. They result in neurotic things, and blocking is one of the immature defense mechanisms. That is temporary inability to remember a traumatic event or a traumatic thing. So the person develops a temporary inability to remember. A person would rather like to say, I don't know, making the individual not know, protects him or her from wrong answer, which might be embarrassing or disruptive. For example, when you ask who is he, what is his name? I don't remember his name. It's on the tip of the tongue. So temporarily they have forgotten because it might be painful for them about mentioning them. So the ego uses this mechanism. As I said, it is protective at that moment, because if it doesn't use it, it becomes very much annoyed, very much problematic. But at a later time, it results in neurosis. So at that time, we have to deal with it. Then regression. This is one of the most important things. We see a lot of people regressing back to the earlier stage, the childhood stage, regression. That is what we call. When the person faces a significant traumatic event, he can't fight with it. Then the only way is he regresses to the childhood. A return to a previous stage of development or functioning, possibly primitive ones, to avoid the anxieties and hostilities involved. For example, a nurse makes an error in giving medication and starts crying like a child. or a person who is depressed may withdraw to his or her room and curl up in a fetal position, that is regressing to the fetal stage where they curl up, keeping the knees flexed, hands flexed like a fetus position. That is regression. And somatization. This is one of the most common defense mechanism used by people. And these are the things which we see in as a doctor, we see these cases very frequently because these people present with somatic complaints. Their anxiety, trauma, tension is converted into a somatic bodily complaint. So in medical OPD, when we see my colleagues, physicians attending the medical OPD, at least 10 to 20% of cases are somatization. They come with non-specific headache, non-specific bodily complaints, and then you get investigations done, everything is normal. Then they find out any stressors, and then they refer to the patient to us. Because 10 to 20% of the people who attend medical OPD have body pains. For example, low socioeconomic status people or people who have been little disinhibitive, they don't come out and say, I have anxiety. The husband doesn't accept. The father doesn't accept. When they have body pains, they have complaints, then they take to the therapist. That is why this is somatization is one of the common things. And this somatization defense mechanisms result what we call as hypochondriasis. That is bodily preoccupation with bodily somatic complaints. The hypochondriac knows more number of doctors than you. He carries a big file with him with various investigations, multiple consultations of the doctors characteristically. This is what we call as hypochondriacal neurosis. He is always happy if you advise an investigation. Then coming to introjection. Again, this is a neurotic defense mechanism. The introjection of a loud object involves the internalization of the characteristic of the object with the goal of ensuring closeness to and constant presence of the object. That is nothing but an unconscious imitation, an unconscious idealization. This is what happens in introjection. For example, person dressing like his or her favorite actress. A little boy who feels painfully small and weak may copy his father in order to feel big and strong. You see a lot of people who have ideals, whether it is stars, movie stars, cricket, football, they try to imitate them. They try to dress like that. This is a part of introjection. Then coming to anxiety and neurotic defense mechanisms. These are again displacement. Very characteristic, very typical, which we always use this defense mechanism in day-to-day life. You have to just review. A purposeful, unconscious shifting of impulses and or affective investment from one object to another in the interest of solving a conflict. For example, an angry husband shouts at his wife and wife yells at their kid. So here, you are displacing your anger from one person to the other person. That is displacement. In fact, even now, in spite of talking about all these defense mechanisms, I use this neurotic defense mechanism. Whenever I have a problem at home, I shout at my own patients. Then after shouting 2 or 3 patients, I realize that I am showing the aggression at home towards the patients. And then at least then I realize and stop doing that. So we always do, knowingly or unknowingly. This is one of the commonest defense mechanism everybody use. That is the Nitya Jeevitanlo eppudu jarige incident. This is what happens in every day-to-day life, this displacement. Repression. It is a bad idea or feeling eliminated from consciousness. Forget and forget. Example, a child who was abused by his father doesn't recall any of it because it is painful. So what the child does, it represses. And it represses into subconscious, which goes into unconscious later. So that is another common defense mechanism which is used. But again, if you use it too frequently, if you use it too many times, this is always going to result in a problematic neurotic problem. That's why it is again a neurotic defense mechanism. Isolation of the affect. Reality is accepted without the expected human emotional response to the reality. Example, father of a dead victim identifies the victim's body but doesn't express any emotion. That isolation of the affect that is accompanied with the thing is isolated. Here he is able to see his child who is dead and identified, but the emotion associated with it has been isolated. This we also see. That is isolation of the affect. Then intellectualization, Medhavulandaru upyoginche defense mechanism. Intellectualization. It's an attempt to avoid expressing actual emotions associated with a situation by using the intellectual process of logic and reasoning. For example, a young professor receives a letter from his fiancée about his breaking the engagement. He shows no emotion. When discussing this with his best friend, instead he analyzes his fiancée behavior and tries to reason why the relationship has failed. So his fiancée has broken the engagement, and this person doesn't feel emotionally because he is intellectualizing the things. He is discussing about why his fiancée has broken the engagement, why his fiancée is not able to continue as an intellectual level, at the intellectual level. This is what we call as intellectualization. Or the second thing, the patient who has been diagnosed suffering with cancer or malignancy will be talking to his friend or family members. All the methods the doctor has used to get this diagnosis, that is end stage of cancer, is very interesting, very cute. That's what he would say. This doctor is very smart. He has come out with the diagnosis of my suffering with end stage of cancer. He has done a lot of investigations. He's taken the history and he has come to the conclusion. He's very intelligent. So this person is using the intelligent as intellectualization defense mechanism and not reacting to the disease which he has been diagnosed, because otherwise he would go into depression. And so the ego is using this defense mechanism. Acting out, we see in the children, the temper tantrums, you act out. For example, the direct expression of an unconscious wish or impulse in action to avoid being conscious of the accompanying effect. For example, children who throws temper tantrums, or the person, instead of saying, I am angry with you, he will throw an object outside, tear the paper or tear. This is what we see in the young adolescents who come to us. We break the remote with them, which they have. They throw the remote. Instead of directly, they cannot do this. They act out. Again, it's a part of recognition. Acting out is a childish behavior. A temper tantrum is a childish behavior. So this is another defense mechanism which is used, which is again a neurotic defense mechanism. Then rationalization. Excuses, lame excuses by people. Rational explanation to justify one's own behavior. Why I behaved like this? I will try to justify myself with various excuses. Rationalization is very common among medical professionals in covering their medical errors. For example, okay, he has committed an error, but he will say, okay, I have done whatever I could do, and these things happen. This is what the doctor who has committed an error would say. Or the student who has gone to, during the exams, just tomorrow or day after tomorrow, he has exams, but he goes to a movie and comes back and tries to rationalize himself. My mind is completely anxious. Now I have to I went to a movie, now my mind is clear, I can read, I can study. Otherwise I would have not gone to the movie, but this going to the movie has to be there. It has helped me. The same way a student may convince himself for his low grades that if I had better teachers, I would have gotten higher grade. So he doesn't blame himself. He blames the teacher. Again, as I said, lame excuses. Excuses, lame excuses is what rationalization is. So that is what the things, even the old story of the fox and the grape. The fox can't reach the grapes, and the fox thinks that the grapes are sour. So that is a rationalization of the fox. Reaction formation. This is one of the defense mechanisms which is used mainly in obsessive compulsive disorder. Unacceptable impulse is transformed exactly to the opposite one, to hide one's true feelings by behaving in exact opposite manner. The person behaves exactly in opposite manner. For example, a person who is angry with a colleague actually ends up being particularly courteous and too friendly with him, though he is having basically hatred and anger towards his friend. He covers it up, and that is exactly reaction formation. Opposite things he do. The same thing in OCD. He is obsessed with the dirty thoughts, and he has a reaction formation. He is very clean. He wants to be clean, everything to be in a particular order. Basically, his thing is inorderly and completely dirty things, but he has exactly uses the reaction formation and becomes want to be everything very clean, everything in a crisscross order and nothing to be moved. All these things, that's why I said one of the commonest things used by the obsessive compulsive disorder. Undoing. So what you have done wrong is undone by a defense mechanism. For example, an unconscious attempt to take back, nullify, or undo a thought that had resulted in guilty or anxiety. Example, excessively praising someone after having insulted them. So he has insulted them, and now exactly reverse. He does excessive praise to undo whatever criticism he has done. He has to come out. A man gives his wife a bunch of roses after their argument the previous night. And if you take the obsessive compulsive disorder, again undoing is another defense mechanism. He feels the harm might occur, a thought might come to him that harm occurs to his parents, and to undo that he has to put the switch on and off 5 times, or magical number, what we call 7 times, odd number or even number. So we know that, and he knows also at the same time that is odd. How can the putting a switch on and off will prevent my parents not getting hurt? He knows it. That is very characteristic of obsessive disorder. And this undoing is also the defense mechanism used. And passive aggression. Aggression towards an object expressed indirectly and ineffectively, the passivity, unconscious passive hostility. Indirectly expressing anger, hatred on any other feeling. Here there is no open aggression, no violence, no abuse, no physical abuse, no oral abuse. But the passive aggressive behavior example is, she has agreed to share her notes with me, but after the class, she went straight to home. A student talking about his colleague. So she is passively denying giving the notes. And a child who gets scolded by her parents doesn't revolt against the parents at that time, rather stays silent and refuses food, and ultimately becomes lethargic, while the parent in turn gets worried and scared about the child's behavior. So this is passive aggression, indirectly saying no mechanism. Then dissociation. This is another common mechanism which we come across in the people who come with problems. A temporary but drastic modification of character or sense of personality to avoid emotional distress. A significant trauma has happened, and after that, this dissociation occurs. It includes fugue states and hysterical conversion reaction. Classical phrase for this is third person experience of first person events. Example, after a life-threatening accident, when you survived it, the feeling of accident, a dream-like state, and everything going slow. For example, I was telling about hysterical conversion reaction, possession things, and multiple personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, somnambulism. In all these, this defense mechanism is used. We can see how things dissociate from one person to other. The very characteristic word given as classical phrase, the third person experience of first person events. The one which is very popular, aperture to do multiple personality roles, suddenly he becomes violent, or suddenly he comes back to normal, shy, introvert. This is the splitting that happens, and these are all the neurotic defense mechanisms which we have discussed till now. These defense mechanisms prevent the ego from a significant trauma at that moment. But you have to face event. So if you use these immature defense mechanisms, neurotic defense mechanisms, narcissistic defense mechanisms, these, if you use frequently, it will result in a psychological problem, neurotic problem, which have to be dealt by a psychoanalyst. You are using these defense mechanisms, you interpret them, you make the person identify by free association techniques or pentothal abreaction. These things are brought out by the person and suggest. So these are all the immature defense mechanisms which majority of us use, which neurotic defense mechanism which we use. But now coming to the mature defense mechanisms. The mature defense mechanisms are humor. In fact, the humor is the best way of talking to somebody, pointing out his inefficiency or his wrongness. We can indirectly, not straightly saying, but indirectly bring out his fault. And that is one of the best accepted mature defense mechanism. Highest of all the defense mechanisms as far as Freud was concerned. So for example, the person would say, I am going to die forever, alone, ha ha ha. Or in mature defense humor, you can say, but in humor, we should never comment on the problems or the physical disabilities of a problem regarding, say, limping or a person with intellectual disability. That should not never use it, and it's not really humor. The humor is one which brings out your point to the other person without harming him, without disturbing him. That is one of the most important defense mechanism, and a mature defense mechanism, and the highest of all the defense mechanisms. Life is so much easier with a sense of humor. We see across and we bring out our point humorously. People will accept, people will change. Then sublimation. This is another mature defense mechanism which a lot of people practice. The unacceptable impulse is transmitted into an acceptable channel. These things are not accepted generally, but they are acceptable. You convert the unacceptable impulse into an acceptable impulse socially. For example, the anger impulse is channelized as a punching or kickboxing. A person with impulse of cutting human bodies can become a surgeon, and that way it is socially accepted. The surgeon cutting the pathological parts, removing, is quite socially acceptable thing. In the same way, the anger of the person who is very aggressive, he will be shining in army, in dangerous sports, in, for example, kickboxing and other things. So here, the mature defense mechanism of sublimation, you are converting an unacceptable impulse to the society by making it acceptable. So that is what sublimation is. This is the kickboxing. Suppression. Suppression differs from repression. Repression is an unconscious mechanism, while suppression is a conscious, voluntary mechanism. Blocking of unpleasant feelings and experiences from the awareness to avoid the discomfort and anxiety associated with that unpleasant feelings. The conscious or semi-conscious decision to postpone attention or to the impulse or conflict. For example, student consciously decides not to think about her insult in examination so that he can study effectively. So what has happened during the exam? The examiner has abused her. She has to forget about it. She has to suppress to face the future exams. Or a homosexual who intentionally does not date someone of the same sex because the unacceptable does not express itself. So he suppresses the things, and that is a conscious, voluntary, mature defense mechanism. Altruism. This is one of the best defense mechanisms. Though Freud mentions humor as the best defense mechanism, I feel altruism is the best, toppest, highest defense, mature defense used by a person. Receiving gratification either from acting for others or from response from others. Example, the man who wished he had become a doctor may push his family members, and make them to become a doctor. And if they don't become a doctor, he will feel bad and blame himself if they do not fulfill his expectations. And most importantly, the second one, if you take the example, which is useful for the society also, a person who has lost his family in an accident forms an organization for creating awareness on traffic rules. You know, the popular eye hospital in Kakinada, Kiran Eye Hospital, which trains a lot of postgraduates in ophthalmology, was established by an NRI while he was coming on a flight along with family members. It met with an accident. His family members died and he only survived. And he started this hospital on a charity basis, educative basis, no loss, no gain basis. And he has contributed all his property towards the gain of the society. And the institute has established, has trained so many postgraduates, has treated so many patients, has given sight to so many blind people. That is altruism. That is the best defense mechanism which the person use. It is useful for the society and useful for the people. So they don't expect things in return. Of course, there are some types of what we call as pathological altruism, where it goes on to so extreme that yourself will suffer. That is, at the expense of yourself. If every property you have given to the society and which you have started, a trust which you have started, but you don't take care of you and your family, then that will be also a pathological. For example, if you take people like Mahatma Gandhi, who is our father of nation, who has led the total nation and who has made all the people revolt, and who has brought out Satyagraha weapon and come out with salt weapon, and that was what he did and was popularly recognized for his services. His children were a lot of hating him because he never cared for his family members. His children were very much upset, and one or two people have gone into alcoholism. They blamed their father for that. So altruism, again, you have to see, we have to weigh at least, though 90% you do for the society, you have to do for yourself. Taking care of yourself and your family members is not selfish. It is also your responsibility. So that is what altruism is. And I consider altruism the best defense. There are, of course, 3-4 types of altruism. Reciprocal altruism, that is, I do some good thing for somebody, but I expect some reward from that person at a later date. It might not be immediately, and the reward could be either a praise or a physical thing or a monetary thing. But there, I expect a positive feedback from the person. So that is what we call as reciprocal altruism. Well, in pure altruism, you don't expect anything. You help that person, but you don't expect anything at all. That is real altruism, or what we call as pure altruism. And of course, altruism is also genetic. Through family members, it can come, not only environmental, it also has a genetic basis. And group selected altruism is this. For example, I was telling a person who has lost his sight in an accident now concentrates more on ophthalmology, and that group he is much interested. Or a person who is crippled now spends a lot of money on Jaipur food for the people who need it. So a particular specific group, he takes it and helps. Even that is good. So I always consider altruism is the best defense, but it should not become pathological, as too much altruism can actually be a bad thing. Why altruism? Anything too much is bad. Anything too much is bad. Pathological altruism is when people take altruism to the extreme and their actions cause more harm than good. Some common examples of pathological altruism is depression, often seen among healthcare professionals. We have seen a lot of people, a lot of doctors who have been COVID frontline warriors. They have sacrificed their family, they have sacrificed their time, they have got their illness also. They were attacked with the COVID infection. They lost, and in turn they didn't gain much, but the only satisfaction was that they treated the patient. That is the altruistic behavior. There was one anesthetist whom I know in Vijayanagaram who suffered with COVID, who was almost on the oxygen, and he was treating another patient who had a ventilator. He had to be given, and this person who was suffering, he treated that patient also, this doctor. That is altruism. In fact, luckily in medical profession, we have more chances to become altruistic. Of course, every profession can become, but in medical profession, it is directly seen and it is very helpful. And that is, but it should not go to very severe significant pathology where you yourself get affected, or family gets affected. That is again pathological altruism. As I again repeat, too much of anything is bad. And anticipation, again, a mature defense mechanism. The realistic anticipation of planning for future inner discomfort implies overly concerned planning, worrying, and anticipation of possible outcomes. Example, person thinks ahead and plans his retirement from work when he gets old. So after 5 years, I'm going to retire. So my retirement life, I won't be having much salary. So planning for that, planning for a secure, safe, retired life, that is anticipation. And that should be there always. And anticipating the needs. But again, don't over-anticipate and sacrifice the present thing. One of my friends who has just joined as an assistant professor, he was talking about what will happen to him at 25 years later, or when he retires. He is planning 3 decades ahead. That is what over-anticipation, which should not be done again. Then asceticism. This is another defense mechanism. The elimination of directly pleasurable effects attributable to an experience. It is the restriction in some disturbing aspect of one's life and gratification derived from renunciation. Example, monks take a vow of silence and giving up sex. That is the asceticism, especially found in Buddhism, where the monks take the silence. And already I have mentioned about the obsessive compulsive disorder, where the battle is between the id and ego, and the defense mechanisms they use are isolation, undoing, and reaction formation. And Freud believed OCD related to the anal stage of psychosexual development. And these are the defense mechanisms which I have already mentioned. Total defense mechanisms are where explanations in a single slide, which I'm going to share with you all. I have asked the secretary. I have no objection for sharing this PPT with all people. I follow Dr. Pratyusha Subbarao Garu, who I think he is also altruistic, but I will caution Dr. Subbarao Garu to be not to be pathologically altruistic. Thank you for the management of Psychologists Association for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir. I would like to add, good evening, everyone. Once again, it's so nice a lecture by Dr. Kota Suresh Garu. He exemplified everything. He has put in everything in a nutshell. As I was mentioning earlier, before the session started, the young psychologists who are venturing to start their own counseling centers or want to help people by appropriate scientific methods, they would have definitely got a lot of inputs from Dr. Suresh Garu. He has come from, Dr. Freud, Anna Freud, and he has explained the ego and superego, how the conflicts are balanced by the ego. From then onwards, he had explained meticulously every defense mechanism by categorization and the positive defense mechanisms also. And it is a wonderful presentation, sir. Really,
Thank you very much.
so easily you have divulged into so many issues with all examples for easy understanding of our members, and we are grateful to you. So friends,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
నిజంగా ఈ రోజు సురేష్ గారు ఇచ్చిన మెసేజ్ ఆర్ ఇన్పుట్స్ చాలా ఉపయోగకరంగా ఉంటాయి. ఎందుకంటే that's why in the beginning I requested the members to please note down all the important points so that you will, because in say for example in counseling, you can't avoid, while examining your own client or a subject, you will come across definitely among the psychosomatic problems, the defense mechanisms. Because these defense mechanisms, they will not be identifying themselves and they feel that there's something to worry about. Even defense mechanisms are manaki problems kana kanipistuntayi when you deal with a subject. And he was so generous in telling we are continuous students and we should learn from our clients. That's a very important thing. Endukante full knowledge you can never have. And when you start with these kind of classes and sessions by the experts, will definitely help us. They will motivate us. They will enhance our existing knowledge, and soon you will go up the ladder by gaining experience from case to case. ఇది చాలా బాగా చెప్పారు సార్. Thank you very much. Now the floor is open for anyone wants to ask a few questions relating to what Sir has explained. ఎవరికైనా ఏమైనా డౌట్లు ఉంటే let's not go beyond the subject. Within the subjects, ఎందుకంటే Sir is an experienced person, you may feel like asking anything to it. So time is again is it, and he was having some kind of jovial if you want to cut a person, అది యూ విల్ టర్న్ అవుట్ టు బి ఏ సర్జన్ అట. మరి అది చూడండి, అలాంటి డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం కూడా ఉంటాయి. సో ఐ రిక్వెస్ట్ ఆల్ ది మెంబర్స్ టు ఫీల్ ఫ్రీ ఇన్ ఆస్కింగ్ అండ్ with the intention to get your doubts clarified. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, sir.
సీతాపతి గారు చేతులు ఎత్తారు, ఒక ముగ్గురు నలుగురు, వాళ్ళకి అన్మ్యూట్ చేయండి.
ఆల్రెడీ అన్మ్యూట్ చేసి ఉంచాను సార్, మాట్లాడచ్చు.
అన్మ్యూట్ చేసి నా చేతులు ఎత్తిన వాళ్ళు క్వశ్చన్ చేయండి సార్.
సార్ చంద్రశేఖర్ సార్ మాట్లాడండి.
చంద్రశేఖర్ సార్ మాట్లాడండి.
గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ టు ఆల్ సార్. ఈరోజు డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారు ఎక్సలెంట్ క్లాస్ తీసుకున్నారు. డిఫెన్స్ మెకానిజం అండ్ ఈగో సూపర్ ఈగో గురించి ఎక్సలెంట్ గా డిఫరెన్షియేట్ చేసి మాకు మంచి నాలెడ్జ్ ఇచ్చారు సార్. అలాగే మీ నోట్స్ కానీ పీపీటీ కూడా రిక్వెస్ట్ టు షేర్ టు ఆల్ మెంబర్స్ సార్. ఇంకొకటి ఏమంటే ఇది ఫస్ట్ టైం సార్ ఒక సైకియాట్రిస్ట్ నుంచి మనం ఇంత మంచి క్లాస్ వినడం అనేది. ఫ్యూచర్ లో కూడా సార్ ఏపీఎఫ్ రిక్వెస్ట్ ఏమంటే అంటే సైకాలజిస్టులు ఎటువంటి కేసెస్ టేకప్ చేయొచ్చు, దాన్ని ఎటువంటి అంటే సిమ్టమ్స్ ఉంటే మనం సైకియాట్రిస్ట్ కి రెఫర్ చేయొచ్చు అనేది ఒక క్లాస్ తీసుకుంటే మాకు అందరికి కూడా ఉపయోగం ఉంటుంది సార్. అలాగే కొత్తగా సైకాలజిస్ట్ గా స్టార్ట్ చేసిన వాళ్ళు ఇలాంటి అంటే సీనియర్ డాక్టర్స్ సైకియాట్రిస్ట్ దగ్గర ఏదైనా ఇంటర్న్షిప్ లాగా కానీ అంటే సో దట్ ఎట్లా అంటే కేస్ హిస్టరీ రికార్డ్ చేయడం ఎట్లా, ఎటువంటి కేసెస్ ను ఎట్లా మనము ఏ స్టేజ్ లో మనం సైకియాట్రిస్ట్ కి రెఫర్ చేయాలనేది ఒకటి సార్. అలాగే గ్రూప్ ఆల్ట్రిజం లో అన్నారు కదా, సో దాంట్లో ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఏపీఎఫ్ తీసుకోవచ్చా సార్? నాకు అదొకటి చెప్పండి సార్. థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar. I think thank you for your compliments, and definitely one topic about whom should we refer, when should we refer to the psychiatrist, and when should psychiatrists refer to a psychologist. It is a mutual thing because both our professions are only to solve the human beings' problems, and when it becomes entirely biological and to be treated medically, then we have to psychologist has to refer to psychiatrist. And because counseling and other things, you are more well versed than us. When we rule out the biological problems, it is only emotional problems or conduct problems, we can refer to a psychologist, vice versa. So that way it is going to be useful. I'll definitely try to work up on that, and once the association permits me, I will again join you about that class. And regarding group altruism, this particular group, they form only relation to one particular activity. Either, as I was mentioning, for example, people who have been crippled, they focus on the crippled people. A group is formed in a Jaipur foot, or they get the things done. Or, for example, children who are having cleft lip and cleft palate, and for those people, the association is formed and they look after them that particular problems. The other problems they don't deal. That way group altruism is there.
Okay, thank you very much sir.
కొండారెడ్డి గారు మాట్లాడచ్చు సార్. కొండారెడ్డి సార్ నెక్స్ట్ హ్యాండ్ రైజ్ చేశారు
సార్. గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ సార్.
Good evening, Kondareddy garu.
Very interesting topic, sir. Today we are dealing. Sir, I am asking one question.
Sure.
Reasons for blocking and how to overcome that one.
Which one?
What are the causes or reasons for blocking? One of the neurologic defense mechanisms. One. How to overcome that one?
So, not only blocking this immature neurotic defense mechanisms which I have mentioned, the person uses this mechanism to overcome the conflict which he faces at that moment. So in order to avoid pain he uses this mechanisms, of which blocking is also a mechanism. But later, as a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a psychoanalyst, you have to bring out that this immature defense mechanisms to the forefront and interpret that to the particular person, and that will help him to deal things with a better way. That's how we use the psychoanalysis. But as I mentioned, psychoanalysis is now becoming comparatively obsolete. A lot of people are not using. As far as psychiatry is concerned, psychoanalysis type of psychotherapy is being only practiced at Calcutta and at Kerala, 2-3 places only, and in NIMHANS Bangalore there is a separate department for that. But otherwise, majority are not using. The reason also is, we, as I mentioned also, we need lot of time. We have to spend so many sessions to bring out the conflict that person is facing and the defense mechanism which he has used, and to interpret that defense. So you have to spend a lot of time, and at the same time the patient is also not ready. He wants an instant response, and that is not possible with psychoanalysis. Thank you.
సురేష్ గారు మాట్లాడచ్చు.
Sir. Not audible.
సార్ మీ వాయిస్ రావట్లేదు సురేష్ సార్.
Unmute చేసుకో.
సురేష్ గారు మీ వాయిస్ ఒకసారి చెక్
నమస్తే సార్, సురేఖ సార్, నాట్ సురేష్.
సురేఖ మేడం మాట్లాడండి
సార్. వెరీ ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్ నైస్ టాపిక్ సార్ టుడే. అయితే ఒక డౌట్ సార్, నార్సిస్టిక్ పర్సనాలిటీ అండ్ యాంగ్రీని ఎలా ఓవర్కమ్ చేయాలి?
నార్సిస్టిక్ పర్సనాలిటీ,
నార్సిస్టిక్ పర్సనాలిటీ క్యారెక్టరిస్టిక్స్ ఉన్న వాళ్ళు దాని నుంచి బయటపడాలంటే ఏం చేయాలి సార్?
okay, thank you for your compliment. Again, same thing, narcissistic personality, the defense mechanisms which he uses. It is not only regarding narcissistic personality, any neurotic defense mechanisms which the person is using, you have to bring out that these mechanisms he is using. This he has started using because he couldn't find courage to face the conflict at that moment earlier, and he has used this immature defense mechanism which solved the problem temporarily, but because of narcissistic defense mechanism he continues to face a lot of problems. Then you have to analyze and bring out the defense mechanism into the forefront and make him understand, not you explaining, we should make him understand about this mechanism which he has used, and that will solve the problem, not only regarding narcissism, any neurotic thing. Thank you, Mr.
How to overcome angry sir?
Controlling of aggression, there are a lot of theories. That itself is a class. How to control anger, aggression. I think we need a separate class for that, because there are so many things in controlling anger. How to direct in dealing with other things, passive aggression, active aggression, conduct disorder type of aggression, social aggression. So many things are there which needs a separate class.
సో సురేష్ గారు మాట్లాడండి.
Thank you sir.
సురేష్ సార్, సార్ మీ వాయిస్ రావట్లేదు సార్. సురేష్ సార్, టెక్నికల్ ఇష్యూ ఉన్నట్టుంది. మీ వాయిస్ ఇట్స్ నాట్ ఆడిబుల్.
Yeah, voice is not audible.
దేర్ మే బి టెక్నికల్ ఇష్యూ. ఒక్క 1 minute రీలాగిన్ అవ్వండి సార్. సురేష్ సార్ లేకపోతే రీలాగిన్ అవ్వండి. ఇంకెవరైనా ఉన్నారు సార్? గోపాల్ సార్, శ్రీ గోపాల్ గారు, హ్యాండ్ రైజ్ చేశారు, మాట్లాడతారా? నా క్వశ్చన్ అడుగుతారా?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Your class was excellent, sir. Sir, altruism meda you have said that Kiran Eye Hospital, that excellent example you said, sir. Next, I have a doubt that difference between conversion disorder and hypochondriasis.
Yeah, very good question, Sri Gopal.
Thank you.
Thanks for the compliment. And the difference between hypochondriasis and conversion. In conversion, it is an acute onset, sudden onset. Suddenly the person becomes blind. Suddenly the person becomes paralytic. Suddenly the person has a tremor. While in hypochondriasis, it is slow, gradual increase of multiple somatic complaints. In conversion, it is only one complaint, and usually it is loss of something. Loss of, for example, paralysis, loss of voice. These are the things which happens in conversion. While in hypochondriasis, you have multiple somatic complaints, bodily complaints, without an organic basis. He will complain pain chest, he will complain headache, and you give him a suggestion. He has come to you with headache and pain in the chest, and you to ask him, do you have pain in the abdomen, do you have pain in the limbs? And 90% they would answer yes. And that is the major difference. And the hypochondriac person would always need some diagnosis to be made, and goes on doctor shopping, go to multiple doctors, gets investigations done. As I was mentioning, the hypochondriac person knows more number of doctors than me. He knows the new doctor who has opened a clinic, and he is very happy if you prescribe an investigation. While in hysterical conversion, it is not there. And hysterical conversion, it is an acute onset, usually followed by a significant trauma. There is a temporal relationship between the traumatic event and loss of vision or loss of voice. While in hypochondriasis, it is not so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
ఓకే, సురేష్ గారు లైన్ లో ఉన్నారా?
Yes, sir.
అప్పుడు వాయిస్ వస్తుంది, ప్లీజ్.
Yeah. Sir, good evening, sir. Suresh, sir.
Good evening.
It's a really wonderful class, sir. You have given in a nutshell and everything you have covered. And so myself also, Elgu Suresh Kumar, senior English faculty and psychologist.
Oh,
And I
glad
feel
to meet you.
proud,
Glad to meet
because we have both names, and in our group, nearly 7 Suresh are there.
you. Oh,
7, 8 Suresh Kumar, sir. Almost. It's very nice, and hearing your class is very good, and it's a really boost up to get mechanisms and all that. And see, really wonderful, sir. A psychiatrist joined our psychologist association, and we feel happy because we are okay, but medical background also we need, sir. Actually, like you, the people are very essential for APF. As a vice president of APF, I'm requesting you and humbly requesting you sincerely to be with us and try to enlighten us and try to give more knowledge in that regard, as of having your medical medical background regarding this one, sir. Right? Thank you very much.
sure.
And
Thank you. Thank you for
Sir.
your compliments. And I will definitely be associated with you, and especially with you because you have also my name. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Sir, a little doubt, sir. A small doubt. Can I ask, sir?
Sure, sure. Most welcome.
Yes, sir. Sir, as of Sigmund Freud, he reiterated and he stressed over this sexual gratification should be satisfied. Otherwise, all the levels suggested by Sigmund Freud, that sexual gratification must be satisfied. Otherwise, it may harm to the human being in any factor, in any level of his life. But you can see the examples like Swami Vivekananda, Mother Teresa, Ramana Maharshi. They are great monks and great spiritual leaders. They were not satisfied, I think, regarding that sexual gratification. But they didn't feel any harm to their life, and they are useful to the entire world, not becoming any psychos or something else, as said by Sigmund Freud. And how is it possible? Which defense mechanism they have applied?
Yes, sir. A nice question. A good question. As you said, Freud has entirely concentrated on sexual conflicts and sexual impulses. And as I was mentioning, even the neo-Freudians later who has come, and his own daughter Anna Freud and Adler and Horney, these people have stressed it is. They said that sexuality is not the prime importance at all. And they said, in addition to sexuality, social and cultural factors are very much important. And if you see the evolution of the things, initially Freud, neo-Freudians, and by neo-Freudians itself, there was somewhat humanistic psychology, and later humanistic psychology, where Abraham Maslow, you were saying about Vivekananda, Mother Teresa, these two people have reached the highest peak of the pyramid of Abraham Maslow, where he says you have reached the highest. Now, no much self is bothered. You don't bother about recognitions, other things. Say, for example, myself, if you take, I still need some recognition. I want some claps from people. That is recognition which I need. I have remained in that stage. I can't go into advance. Only some people like very minority people like Vivekananda ji and other people, they have reached to the topest level of the pyramid. That is the humanistic psychology theory. That's why, and whatever Freud said, we can't take it 100%. And as I was mentioning, you have to consider the era in which Freud said all these things. It was in 1854, when Victorian era, where sex was a taboo. People were not talking about sex, but a lot of other things were happening. Extramarital, premarital relations were going on, but they never talked about that. So during that era, he has come out with that things, which was absolutely correlation with that era, which doesn't fit into present era, only partially. But when we go in deep, when we see a lot of patients, still we feel Freud theories and practice is at least 50% true and correct, even during 21st century. Thank you.
Dr. Suresh Garu, may I add one?
Yes, please.
Elugu Suresh Kumar Garu, perhaps using a wrong statement, Freud never said you must have sexual gratification. I underline. Freud never said you should have sexual gratification. You are using a wrong statement.
Yeah,
it is the unconscious impulses desires of sexual in nature, they create a lot of disturbances in human psychology and lead to many other complications and defense mechanisms also. When you are comparing sexual satisfaction, gratification is something totally different, sir. ఇక మీద అది వాడకండి దయచేసి సురేష్ గారు. ఫ్రాయిడ్ ఎప్పుడు అలా అనలేదు.
Probably what Telugu Suresh wanted to say was not sexual conflict. That is the correct.
బట్ అంటే ఆయన యూజ్ చేసిన వర్డ్ వల్ల దయచేసి అలా వాడితే ఆయన ఏదో సెక్స్ కోసం ఒక ప్లే కార్డ్ పట్టుకొని ఊరంతా తిరిగినట్టుగా అనిపిస్తుంది. నేను జోకులర్లీ చెప్తున్నాను, బట్ ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ సో. ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ సో. So in the process of psychoanalysis, he found some reasonable things that which are the ground realities for his conscious level of behavior. దానికోసం అని అతను చెప్పిన ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్ చాలా వాటిలో మనం చాలా కలిపి చదువుకోవాలి. నాట్ alone, not sex is not he was not referring to sex as sexual intercourse or something. Sex totally different. In a holistic manner you should see. Human beings, animals, what they do, they indulge in some kind of progeny. Their primary duty is to develop offsprings. So the harmonic or genetic things inside a human body, they simulate and stimulate human beings for that kind of action. It is a target or goal. Anyway, this is a very big topic. Only yes. I was only trying to request you not to use that statement. He never asked people to have sexual, Thank you.
I agree with you, and
మీతో ఉన్న పరిచయం వల్ల నేను కొంచెం ఓపెన్ గా అలా మాట్లాడతాను.
I agree with you 100%. We can't see things in isolated. It should be a holistic approach. Things should be kept in your mind at the background. Definitely. Now I understand why so many thousands of people join for your talk.
Yes, sir. I am flattered.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Guntur.
Sir.
Sir.
మీరు కరెక్ట్ చేసినందుకు చాలా హ్యాపీ.
ఏ కరెక్షన్ సార్, మీరు నన్ను కరెక్ట్ చేస్తారు, నేను నా ఇంగ్లీష్ మీరు కరెక్ట్ చేస్తారు, మీరు నేను ఇవన్నీ మ్యూచువల్ బేసిస్, హ్యాండ్ ఇన్ హ్యాండ్.
ఉద్దేశం ఏంటంటే అంటే చాలా మంది ఈ ఏమంటున్నారంటే సెక్సువల్ గ్రాటిఫికేషన్ అనేది
తప్పది
జరగకపోతే
he also in one of his books dark side of mind అనేది he had written, of course in own language translated, it was translated into English. Every human being for that matter has an innate desire for sex and also an innate desire to commit suicide. Understand? అది చాలా డెప్త్ ఉన్న సబ్జెక్ట్. అది అండర్స్టాండ్ చేసుకోకుండా ఓన్లీ మనం అవే హెడ్డింగ్స్ చదివాం అనుకోండి, ఈడో రోజు ఆత్మహత్య చేసుకోవాలి అందరూ అనుకుంటారు. అది కాదు. అంటే there are lot of things, if we go inside we will understand why a lot of research he has done. He is the founder of psychoanalysis. ఎందుకనో అతనికి ముందు ఎవరో మామూలు ఫిలాసఫర్స్ ఎవరో ఏదో చెప్పేవారు తప్పించి సెపరేట్ గ్రూప్ ఆఫ్ సైకాలజిస్టులు ఎప్పుడు మాట్లాడలేదు. he has started it కాబట్టి డెఫినెట్ గా ఆయన వెర్షన్ ఉంటుంది. ఆ తర్వాత నుంచి డిఫరెంట్ స్కూల్స్ ఆఫ్ థాట్స్ వచ్చేసాయి, ఒక్కొక్కరు రకరకాలుగా వెళ్ళిపోయారు. ఆఖరికి మన ట్రాన్సాక్షన్ అనాలిసిస్ ఎరిక్ బెర్న్ కూడా సెపరేట్ గా ఆయన శిష్యుడే, ఆయన వెళ్ళిపోయారు, వేరే స్కూల్స్ పెట్టేసుకున్నారు. బట్ ది ఫ్యాక్ట్ రిమైన్ సేమ్ దట్ ది ఫౌండేషన్ దట్ హి స్టార్టెడ్ అది రిమైండ్, బట్ వెరీ డిఫికల్ట్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్. బేసికల్లీ హి డిడ్ నాట్ రైట్ ఎనీ books in English. All books are translated. Definitely the translators' views will come in the way for us to perhaps wrongly to interpret and things like that. అది మనం పర్సనల్ గా సరదాగా తర్వాత మాట్లాడుకుందాం.
Nice explanation. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Titus garu లైన్ లో ఉన్నారా?
టైటస్ సార్.
సార్ గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్.
డాక్టర్ గారి కాంటాక్ట్ నెంబర్ ఏమన్నా చెప్పగలరా సార్?
తప్పకుండా మేము ఇది షేర్ చేస్తాను సార్. చంద్రశేఖర్ సార్ అవన్నీ కూడా నేను గ్రూప్ లో షేర్ చేస్తాను. ఆల్రెడీ సార్ పర్మిషన్ ఇచ్చారు. నేను పీపీటీ కూడా మీకు షేర్ చేశాను, గ్రూప్ లో షేర్ అయ్యింది. అలాగే వీడియో కూడా మేము షేర్ చేస్తాము, సార్ నెంబర్ కూడా షేర్ చేస్తాం సార్ అని. జస్ట్ ఏంటంటే అందరూ కూడా కొంచెం గ్రూప్ అప్పుడప్పుడు ఫాలో అవుతుంది, జస్ట్ డే 2 days ఒకసారి ఫాలో అవుతుండండి. ఓకే, ఇట్స్ వండర్ఫుల్ సెషన్. అండ్ టైటస్ గారు ప్లీజ్ కన్క్లూడ్.
ఓకే సార్.
సార్ ఒక్క నిమిషం టైటస్ గారు, బిఫోర్ దాట్ సుబ్బారావు సార్ ఉన్నారా?
ఉన్నాను
సార్. మన వాళ్ళకు కూడాను మనం ప్రపోజల్ పెట్టుకున్నాం కదా, August 15th కి ఒక స్పీకర్స్ మారుతారని. దాంట్లో మన వాళ్ళు కూడా ఎవరైనా ఉంటే నేమ్స్ ఇమ్మందాం, మన స్క్రూటినీ చేద్దాం. ఓకే
ఓకే, చెప్పు ఒకసారి ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్.
ఓకే డియర్ ఫ్రెండ్స్, మేము ఏంటంటే బుద్ధా ఫౌండేషన్ తరఫున స్పీకర్స్ మారుతానని
ఫెడరేషన్ కూడా
అదే బుద్ధా ఫౌండేషన్ సైకాలజీ రెండు ఒకటే. సో బుద్ధా ఫౌండేషన్ ప్లస్ సైకాలజీ ఫెడరేషన్ రెండు కలిపి August 15వ తారీఖు, నేను మళ్ళా దాని ఫ్లైయర్ పంపిస్తానండి. సో August 15వ తారీఖుని మనం మధ్యాహ్నం 12 గంటల నుంచి ఓకే రాత్రి 12 గంటల వరకు కంటిన్యూస్ గా మనం స్పీకర్స్ మారుతానని, దానికి ఇంకా బెటర్ నేమ్ ఉంటే పెడదాము, ఇంకా ప్రపోజల్ లో ఉన్నాము. స్పీకర్స్ మారుతానని పెట్టి మన ఉద్దేశం ఏంటంటే 1 hour మాట్లాడకపోయినా సరే ఎవరిని మినిమం ½ an hour అందరూ పార్టిసిపేట్ చేయాలి. మన గ్రూప్ లో ఉన్న ప్రతి ఒక్కళ్ళు కూడా ఒక మంచి టాపిక్, అంటే మీ పేరు టాపిక్ నాకు ఇమీడియట్ గా విదిన్ 2-3 days లో పంపిస్తే మేము టాపిక్స్ ఆ స్పీకర్స్ ని ఐడెంటిఫై చేసి మళ్ళీ స్క్రూటినీ చేస్తాం. ఆ టీం అంతా కూర్చుని ఎవరి నుంచాలి ఏంటి టాపిక్స్ అలా డిసైడ్ చేసుకుని మేమేంటే మధ్యాహ్నం 12 గంటల దగ్గర నుంచి రాత్రి 12 గంటల వరకు కంటిన్యూస్ గా మన జూమ్ లోను ఉంటాయి. ఇవేమో బుద్ధా ఫౌండేషన్ అదర్ ది యూట్యూబ్ ఛానల్స్ లో కూడా మనం ప్రచారం చేస్తాము. ఇట్స్ అ వండర్ఫుల్ ది మాకు ఐడియా వచ్చింది. సో మీరు అందరూ కూడా కోఆపరేట్ చేసి ఇందులో ప్రతి ఒక్కళ్ళు కూడా పార్టిసిపేట్ చేయాలని కోరుతున్నాము. సో నెంబర్ ఎక్కువ వస్తుంది, అంటే మనం ½ an hour పెట్టుకున్నా సరే 24 members పార్టిసిపేట్ చేయొచ్చు. ఓకే, మీరు 1 hour మాట్లాడతారా, ½ an hour మాట్లాడతారా, టైం క్లియర్ గా మాకు మెన్షన్ చేసి చెప్పాలి. గ్రూప్ లో పెట్టచ్చు, లేకపోతే నా పర్సనల్ నెంబర్ కి మీరు పోస్ట్ చేయొచ్చు.
టాపిక్ కూడా
టాపిక్ కావాలండి.
రిపీట్ కాకుండా టాపిక్స్ రిపీట్ కాకుండా ఉంటే
మేము మళ్ళీ స్క్రూటినీ చేస్తాం. టాపిక్ రిపీట్ అయితే మళ్ళీ స్పీకర్స్ ఇంటిమేట్ చేస్తాం, చేంజ్ చేసుకోమని చెప్పేసి. సో వీ నీడ్ సఫిషియంట్ టైం కాబట్టి మాక్సిమం 2-3 days లో మీరు అందరూ కూడా ఎవరైతే మీ పేరు, మీ క్వాలిఫికేషన్స్, మీరు ఏ టాపిక్ చెప్తున్నారు, ½ an hour 1 hour. నెక్స్ట్ ఏంటంటే సార్ ఇందులో టైం మేనేజ్మెంట్ ఉండాలి. టైం అంటే సరిగ్గా ½ an hour. సార్ మటుకు అద్భుతంగా నాకు బాగా నచ్చింది అంటే ఈ డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారు ఏ టాపిక్ సార్ చెప్పారు సరిగ్గా 1 hour అన్నా సరిగ్గా 1 hour క్లోజ్ చేశారు. ప్లస్ అలాగే సార్ ఏంటంటే పాయింట్ టు పాయింట్ ఏది చెప్పాలో అద్భుతంగా చెప్పారు, నిజంగా వండర్ఫుల్. అలాగే ప్రతి ఒక్కళ్ళు కూడా మనం మాట్లాడేటప్పుడు ½ an hour అంటే ½ an hour క్లోజ్ చేసేటట్టు ఉండాలి. 1 hour అంటే ఆ విధంగా మనం ప్రిపేర్ చేసి విదిన్ 3 days లో మీ నేమ్స్ పంపించాలని అందరినీ కోరుకుంటున్నాను. ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ టైటస్ గారు. ఇక్కడ
మంచి ఫోటో కూడా
ఫోటో కూడా
మంచి ఫోటో కూడా మనం బాగా అడ్వర్టైజ్ చేస్తాం. ఫోటో కూడా మంచి ఫోటో ఒకటి పెడితే అది దానికి. ఓకే
ఓకే టైటస్ మాట్లాడు.
డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారికి నాది ఒక చిన్న వినపం ఏంటంటే ఈసారి మళ్ళీ ఇంకో క్లాస్ మాకు ఇవ్వాలి. అది కొంచెం మధ్యలో తెలుగు కూడా మాట్లాడితే బాగుంటుందని మేము కోరుకుంటాం.
అలాగే సార్, ఆర్డర్ చేయండి సార్.
కొంచెం ఆర్డర్ కాదన్నా,
విన్నపం కాదు ఆర్డర్ చేయండి.
విన్నపం ఏం లేదు, కొంతమంది పెట్టారు, మెసేజ్లు పెట్టారు, కొంచెం మధ్యలో తెలుగు మాట్లాడితే కాస్త, ఎందుకంటే అదే దానికి. ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ అన్న, థ్యాంక్ యూ.
ఓకే. గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ. టుడే ద ఏపీఎఫ్ అరేంజ్ చేసిన సెషన్ అటెండ్ అయిన వాళ్ళందరికీ కూడా మరొకసారి ధన్యవాదాలు. అలాగే ఏపీఎఫ్ ఇన్విటేషన్ మన్నించి ఈరోజు చాలా ఎక్సలెంట్ గా ప్రజెంట్ చేసినటువంటి డాక్టర్ సురేష్ గారికి ఏపీఎఫ్ తరఫున ధన్యవాదాలు తెలియజేస్తున్నాం సార్. మీరు మాకు ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని కొత్త అంశాలు మా సైకాలజిస్టులకి మీ యొక్క ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ని మాకు షేర్ చేసేటట్లు మాతో ప్రయాణం చేయాలి. ఇంకా మీరు వీఆర్ ఆల్ టుగెదర్ ట్రావెల్ ఇన్ మెనీ సెషన్స్ టు మెనీ సెషన్స్ సార్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ సార్, థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. మరొక సండే మరొక టాపిక్ తో మళ్ళీ కలుసుకుందాం. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వన్ అండ్ ఆల్.
థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్.